Why German officers feared American artillery more than tanks in the frozen hell of the Ardennes. Veteran German officers, men who had survived the meat grinder of the Eastern Front, feared one sound above all others. It wasn't the rumble of the Sherman tank, nor the roar of the P-47 Thunderbolt overhead. It was a sound that began as a faint whisper in the stratosphere, a whistle that sharpened into a scream, a sound many veterans said arrived before fear itself, a sound that meant the earth was about to split open. To the Wehrmacht, the American soldier was often seen as green, and the American tank as thin-skinned. But there was one element of the U.S. war machine they respected with a terror bordering on the religious: American artillery. By 1944, German commanders were filing reports that sent shivers through Berlin. They weren't losing because of a single wonder weapon. They were losing because of a system so efficient it turned the very sky into a ceiling of falling steel. A machine of mathematics, logistics, radios, and explosives. A machine designed not simply to fight armies, but to erase them. Why did the highest levels of the German High Command consider use artillery, not tanks, the true decider of the war? To understand the nightmare that broke the back of the Third Reich, we have to look beyond the armor. Popular history loves the tank. We obsess over the Tiger's thick armor and the Sherman's ubiquity. But if you asked a veteran of the 2nd Panzer Division what truly shattered their soul in Normandy, they wouldn't point to a tank. They would point to a horizon, because death often came from beyond sight. The United States entered World War II with a unique military philosophy. While the Germans perfected the blitzkrieg, a scalpel of combined arms, the Americans perfected the sledgehammer. This wasn't just a catchy phrase. It was a doctrine of total industrial destruction. While the Wehrmacht viewed artillery as a support tool for the infantry, the U.S. Army viewed the battlefield itself as something to be shaped by fire. In the American mind, infantry existed to find the enemy. Artillery existed to destroy him. That distinction changed everything. American commanders frequently believed it was better to spend ammunition than blood. And that philosophy, cold, practical, industrial, would define how the United States fought. But there was a mystery here. On paper, many German guns, like the 88mm, were ballistically superior. German optics were often excellent. German artillery doctrine was respected. Yet German officers repeatedly described American fire as omnipresent, mechanized, and impossible to escape. What did the Americans know about the physics of death that others did not? The answer didn't lie in the barrels of the guns. It lay in the factories of Detroit, in the telephone wires and radio waves of the front line, in the men calculating trajectories by hand, and in a doctrine that turned 1,000 guns into a single fist. But guns alone weren't what made it terrifying. It was the fact that the Americans had figured out how to make 1,000 guns act as one. And that was something far more dangerous. Industry turned into firepower. To understand the German fear, you must understand the math. Because in World War II, mathematics often became fate. The United States didn't just outfight its enemies. It outproduced them to a degree that defied military logic. By 1944, the U.S. was producing over 15 million artillery shells per month. Month, not year. Month. To a German commander, whose supply lines were being strangled by Allied bombers and horse-drawn logistics, this wasn't just an advantage. It was catastrophe. Industrial apocalypse. In the American sector, ammunition rationing was often almost alien. Some U.S. commanders complained not of shortages, but of insufficient targets. At the Battle of Aachen, U.S. forces fired over 300,000 shells in 2 weeks. At the Siegfried Line, barrages consumed ammunition at rates once thought impossible. Entire villages disappeared under preparatory fire. Historian Martin van Creveld noted that the American logistical tale was the most sophisticated in history. It wasn't just about making shells. It was moving shells, from factories in Ohio to depots in England, across the Channel, onto the Red Bull Express, into muddy artillery pits in Mortain, all in weeks, sometimes days. That was unprecedented. German General Siegfried Westphal once remarked that American industrial power did not simply produce shells, it produced operational collapse. And that may have been the most accurate description possible, because industrial power wasn't background. It was the weapon. Imagine being a German soldier. You fire one mortar. Moments later, 10 American 105s erase your map coordinate. You move. Another barrage finds you. You regroup. Another mission lands. How do you attack an enemy whose ammunition appears infinite? How do you maneuver under an enemy that can turn steel production into tactical annihilation? Many German soldiers never solved that problem. Yet industrial power was only part of the nightmare, because steel alone is inert. The horror was in how that steel was delivered. The weapons that terrified the Wehrmacht, the tools of destruction were varied, but some became legendary. The M1 105mm, the workhorse. Light enough for mobility, powerful enough for devastation. Its crews could sustain astonishing fire. German troops often described it as relentless. Then came the 155mm long Tom, less gun than siege engine. Its range let it strike command posts, reserves, roads, and artillery batteries far behind the front. Even rear areas were no sanctuary. And American doctrine excelled in concentration, not isolated batteries, massed fires, battalion fires, course fires, rolling barrages, counter-battery storms, entire sectors drowning in explosive fragmentation. Then came the new terror. Late 1944, the VT variable time proximity fuse, and suddenly shellfire evolved. Before, artillery hit the earth. Now it burst in the air, exactly where it could kill best. The shell no longer wasted fragments in soil. It turned the sky into a giant shotgun blast. Foxholes became death traps. Tree cover became fragmentation traps. German infantry found even cover could betray them. At the Battle of the Bulge, V-to-fuse shells devastated attacking formations. Veterans described invisible explosions in treetops ripping apart whole squads. Some called it witchcraft. Others called it slaughter. One German officer captured near the Elbe asked to see the automatic cannons he believed the Americans used. He could not accept humans were loading and firing at such rates. But the real revolution wasn't the guns. Not even the fuses. It was what connected them. The brain. The system, not just the guns. This is where the Americans truly surpassed the world. Not because they had better artillery pieces, but because they made artillery think. In many armies, fire requests climbed bureaucracies. In the U.S. Army, a forward observer could unleash an artillery network. That mattered. Because speed kills. Every platoon might have access to an observer. One radio, one call. And entire battalions could answer. The Fire Direction Center, the FDC, was the hidden nerve center. An analog battlefield computer. Maps, charts, deflection, data, timing, corrections. Men doing calculations at astonishing speed. And because of standardization, different batteries could mass fires seamlessly. This was revolutionary. And then, time on target. TOT. Perhaps the most terrifying innovation. Imagine hearing no ranging shots, no warning, nothing. All impact. All at once. Hundreds of shells. 1 second. The long-range guns firing first, short-range firing later. Everything arriving together. Not bombardment. Ambush. Artillery ambush. German officers found this deeply unsettling because it denied reaction, denied cover, denied time itself. The deadliest American weapon wasn't a tank, it was coordination. And increasingly, German officers understood they were not fighting guns. They were fighting a system. When German officers learned to fear, Mortain proved it. August 1944, Hitler launched Operation Luttich. Elite panzers surged, supposedly a decisive counterstroke. Instead, they drove into fire. Hill 314 surrounded Americans. Cut off, outnumbered, but they had radios, and radios meant artillery. Every assembly area, every armored concentration, every German thrust met shellfire. American guns shattered momentum before armor could exploit it. What should have been breakthrough became wreckage. Burning Panthers, dead crews, collapsed assault waves. Then Bastogne, often remembered for nuts. But Bastogne was also an artillery story. Massed defensive fires, precision barrages, pre-registered kill zones, German assaults breaking before reaching lines. Again and again. And in the wider Ardennes, American artillery helped stop what German armor alone could not overcome. Many offensives did not fail at rifle range. They failed under shellfire, ground down, broken before contact. And this pattern repeated. Normandy, Mortain, Bastogne, the Bulge. Different battles, same lesson. German officers learned to fear the sky. Why tanks weren't the real nightmare? Why the fear? Because a tank is visible, finite, understandable. A Tiger could be fought, flanked, avoided, ambushed. A tank sees you. Artillery does not need to. Artillery is impersonal, invisible, omnipresent. It kills before you understand you are in danger. That created something deeper than fear. Helplessness. German memoirs often speak of artillery neurosis. Men shaking, frozen, unable to move under bombardment. Because how do you fight what you cannot see? One German prisoner said, "We know when the British are coming, they stop firing to charge. We know when the Russians are coming, they yell. But the Americans, they just keep firing until there is no one left to fight." And that captured the terror perfectly. American fire wasn't always preparation. Sometimes it was the attack itself. The firepower that helped win the war, historians debate what won the war. Mustangs, Shermans, bombers, landing craft, all mattered. But artillery was often where industrial power touched the battlefield most directly. It enabled breakthroughs, saved infantry, crushed counterattacks, wore down German operational capacity. And perhaps most importantly, it accelerated collapse. Because when movement becomes impossible under fire, maneuver dies. And when maneuver dies, operational defeat follows. The United States turned industry into tactical violence, then turned tactical violence into strategic victory. Not merely through guns, but through a weaponized system of doctrine, supply, communications, and fire. That was the deeper secret. Not better guns in isolation, a better system. And perhaps that is why German officers feared it so much. Because they understood they were facing not individual weapons, but a machine civilization at war. Germany feared American steel on the ground. But what broke their heart? Their will. Their empire was American steel falling from the sky. Was U.S. artillery the true secret weapon of Allied victory? The men who lived through steel rain never had to ask, long after the tanks have rusted away, and forests reclaimed foxholes. Survivors still remember the sound, not the roar of engines, not the machine guns, not even the explosions, but the whistle in the wind, and what came after.